Hello there. My name is Chris Fernandez. I'm a solutions engineer with Keysight Technologies. I'm located in the Northeast, and my email is on the screen there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. So today I'm just gonna go through one of the topics that always come up, which comes down to uh, how we validate dual domain in AS. So we do have to use AS2020 since that's the first time that we are able to do um, this general a grandmaster in two different domains at the same time using the same port. So I'm going to be using the picture here that we see on the above here. I have one port and two devices. So I'm going to add a domain on each domain. So I'm going to be using domain 0 and domain 10. As a DUT, I'm going to be using NXP Switch. So the NXP Switch in my case here is connected to ports 13 and 14 on my Ixia side. The only thing I have to change on the NXP Switch are two files. So if you take a look at my screen here, now I'm on my LXP switch. So there's two files that needs to be changed. One is this FTTP-BR. I have a bridge on my NXP switch. This is a bridge setup, and the only thing I have to change on this file here is the addition of a common P2P as protocol. So if you take a look at that file. If you take a look at the file, the only modifications that I need to do is on my part of my port 0 setup in terms of which I'm using for delay mechanism. So I'm going to be using common P2P. So this is the only change that is done here on the main file. It's on here, this right here. And on my other file that I need to change is going to be over the file that ends with -1. So in this file here, the only modification you got to do is to change the domain, the second domain that you want to add to the setup over here. So if you add domain 10, domain 100, whatever, so on, and then the priority, if you want to set the priority here too. I didn't make any modifications here. I just changed the domain number here on my DUT and enable to. And so now to be able to configure the DUT, in this case, all we got to do is to call it. So ptp.sh.start. So we're going to start running that on my bridge. So my configuration for the switch itself, if I can do it here, just so you guys know what the configuration is for the switch and the bridge that I have set up. It's under network setup switch. So this is the configuration here. I'm using VLAN 100 and I'm adding ports 0 through 3 in one of the ports as you can see here. So this is all the configuration is for creating a switch. This file here is called by the interface. So every time the reboot the NXP, this will be called. So now that I have running, that I'm already running on the switch, the GTTP on the switch, I can go into my configuration for my router, for my IxNetwork. So for us to be able to understand what's going on the switch here, I'm just going to add a tail on the log for the GTTP stuff for the bridge. So I'm going to copy here, and this is just on port 0 and 1 that I'm kind of zooming into. And as you can see here, I can stop right away. So I have to use CMLDS on both ports since I have multiple domains. And then on port 0, I have domain 0 and domain 10 on port 0 running. And I also have domain 0 and domain 10 on port 1 running. So I'll keep going on that. So I'm going to leave it running here on the background. You can see that it's going to start running here, and then I'm going to create a new session for our IxNetwork. And at this point here, all I'm going to do is going to be creating AS2020 session on ports 13 and 14. Port 13 I'm going to be using as my grandmaster, and so I'm going to add a protocol, and I'm going to over here a filter. I'm going to use the 2020. I don't need to use Ethernet since the A2020 it requires Ethernet, so the program will add his Ethernet layer to it. So I'm picking here, which is my same IP address as my chassis. So I'm running this on the IxNetwork part of my chassis. So after I get a reading, I'm going to be picking port 13, and I say add new topology. At this point, I brought in a topology with PTP and my port. So I can add another topology that I'm going to be using on my slave side. So same thing here on the other side now. I'm using the same A2020, and I'm using port 14 for that, and I'm going to add topology. At this point here, I have one port and one device here. Since I want to have two domains, I'm going to be using two devices here on this side. So that's the two devices for. And I'm also going to be using two devices on the slave side. So I'm going to just label them here so we can know for sure what we're doing. So this is the grandmaster, and it's connected to SW port 0 on my switch. And over here, same thing. It's going to be the slave side, and I'm connected to switch port 1 on my DUT in this case. So for the configuration, I'm going to go into my PTP here, and under the PTP tab here, I'm going to actually change the role here. This is my grandmaster, so this is going to be my master side. So I'm going to change this to master. The PTP delay and the multicast, I'm going to leave it as default, and I'm going to include domain 10 as my second domain that I'm looking at, right? So I have two domains, 0 and 10, and I also need on the GTTP tag, I need to enable CMLDS here in order for it to work. So I'm going to enable that. So that's all the modifications that I'm going to be doing here for this side, for the GM side, right? GM as switch port 0. Okay. On the slave side, same thing. I'm going to go into my GTP tab here. I'm going to enable CMLDS since I have two domains. And under PTP here, I just have to add the domain that I have. So as a role, it comes in as slave by default. And the domain number here is 10, my second domain, right? So now I have a list of two domains, and I have a master and a slave on that side. So just to start things off, one thing I like to do usually is to connect the ports. So connecting the ports will bring the two ports up, and I should see a green bar here under the two ports. And we can take a look on the DUT here that the links will flip, right? So it's going to reboot the port, and we're going to get ready for our testing. So you can see here links up and down, and now the links are ready to start testing. So for starting off, I'm going to just to bring in both. So I'm going to click protocol. That's going to bring in both sides of the two-arm testing that I have here, going through the test. So I can see that my master comes right away because it's not depending on anything, and my PTP, my slave side, is now up, right? So on the DUT side, you can read here. Let me just stop the tail here so you can see, and it stop rolling. So you can see that port 0 is my slave. So this port is connected here. You can think of this cloud here is my slave to my master. So this is my master port that has two domains, and it's running on domain 0. And you can see here on domain 1, on domain 10 as well, it's a slave on port 0. So he's the DUT is a slave for port 1 here. And you can kind of see you can look at the propagation delay on both. So for port 0, I'm looking at about 300 and something. And on the IXA side now, let's look at the IXA side and see what we can check. So I usually like to go to see statistics, and we can do a PTP drill down. There's two PTP tables here that you can use. The PTP per port gives you control plane information, so the number of announcement messages and sync messages and so on that got sent out. As you can see here, announced messages was received twice, right? While they're negotiating who is going to be the grandmaster. So that's the only time you're going to see this. So now, as part of the Avenue conformance test or so on, this number here should not increase, right? You should not, because now you have a master established, and the slave should not be sending announced message, for example. But you're going to see the announced message being sent out here, received here on this side, because this side is my slave on the other port, right? So that's the PTP per port information that's given to you. Now on the PTP drill down information, you can see that both of my ports and both domains are up. You can see the offset here. You can see that's very close, because as we know, it doesn't really necessarily that the clock is better. It just means that the clock is closer to each other, right? Since we're using ports on the same chassis, they're kind of going off the same port. So you can see that the offset here is very small, and it's good. And what it really matters is the delay, right? The path delay for TSN. So the path delay for TSN for this switch is about 300, which is reasonable for what we're trying to accomplish. And on the other side here, you can also see that my slave has a master, which is my DUT here, and he also has a grandmaster, which is actually my other port, right? So everything is correct and working on both domains, domain 0 and domain 10. Now let's say, for example, that you want to add a second clock to this setup, right? So we don't want to be using the same clock to be part of this configuration. So what we need to do here now is to go in here. I'll leave the stats information below here so we can see the offset. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to stop the grandmaster clock, and then under advanced, that's where we can kind of give it a slightly delay or a slightly different clock. So I'm going to do a refresh here on my screen, and then I'm going to actually click to view details. I'm going to click on the PTP here, and under advanced, let's say I'm going to add, I can add either on domain 0 and domain 1. So let's pick domain 0, for example, and I'm going to add a slight different. It's like adding two clocks, right? Two origin clocks, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'm expecting is that my grandmaster is going to come back in. So the offset now is based on the configuration of the NXP alone. So when I'm bringing my grandmaster back up, I'm going to see that there's at least a 12,000 nanosecond delay here based on this offset that I'm doing on my domain 0 of the grandmaster, right? So this is how I'm defining a nanosecond per second. It's not just a nanosecond, but it's actually 999 right here, 5 nines right here. So I'm gonna when I bring this back online, you're gonna see that my domain 0 now is coming in from a different clock. This is how we can do it on a different clock on a different domain. So anyway, this is all I want to cover on this session here. I hope this information was useful. If you have any questions, please let me know. I did not cover things like negative testing that we can also do here based on the configuration that we have here so far. Under the negative testing, that's where we can add drops and drop on signaling itself, the control plane. We can kind of mess up and see how the clock behaves. Okay, so far this is all on the show. I hope if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and we'll be glad to help out. Thank you. Bye.